boxing. My favorite sport of all time. Floyd Mayweather Jr., TBE, and arguably the greatest boxer of all time. Logan Paul, one of the top YouTubers of all time. We gotta talk about this. Now, the narrative of many people has been,
competition right now. He's fighting these guys from the internet, from the YouTubes. You know, that ain't boxing. That's not boxing. Floyd Mayweather is ruining the sport. Floyd Mayweather mess up boxing, man. Floyd Mayweather mess up boxing, man.
Now we're gonna talk about the meaning of exhibition bouts. Allow me to explain the difference between a standard regulated boxing match, a boxing exhibition, and a celebrity boxing match. A standard boxing match is a bout between two trained professional fighters that in most cases had an amateur career, even if it was short. A celebrity boxing match is between two celebrities or participants that have some sort of fame or notoriety in any other field other than boxing. In most cases, actors, musicians, or other sports players. Like it could be a basketball or baseball player or a wrestler. Now, exhibition bouts is where it can get tricky. Well, it's not tricky, but a simple Google search will tell you that a boxing exhibition is a contact sport, non-profit event. Usually a boxing fight in which participants fight, normally for 3 rounds. They may wear large gloves to minimize the punch harm or impact on the combatants, headgear, and non-boxing related clothing. But the definition isn't always used and held to that meaning. It could range from 2 professional boxers or a boxer versus celebrity, but in my estimation, boxing exhibitions have 2 common denominators. 1, it's a boxing match that in some way is a mismatch. And 2, it's a boxing match that doesn't count towards your official boxing record or anywhere legitimately in your career. It could be a heavyweight versus a flyweight, or a professional boxer versus a professional actor, or a professional boxer versus an amateur boxer, or a bear, or a professional boxer versus anything other than an equal level professional boxer. But there has always been high profile boxing exhibition matches, and that's what we gotta get into today. Now, way before Floyd Mayweather Jr., Floyd Mayweather Sr., and even Floyd Patterson, exhibition bouts existed. With that said, let's start at the beginning. One of the first, most notably documented boxing exhibition bouts came in the form of Jack Johnson versus Stanley Ketchel, October 16th, 1909, in Colma, California, at the Mission Street Arena. Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion, from December 26, 1908, with a victory over Tommy Burns.
Jack Johnson. Here, in slow motion, you can see the blistering attack. Burns was absolutely defenseless, just seconds before the police stopped the motion picture cameras and entered the ring to halt this very one-sided fight. Jack Johnson becomes heavyweight champion of the world.
And Stanley Ketchel, who won his first world middleweight championship February 22nd, 1908, against Mike Twin O'Sullivan. Now, this exhibition was a great heavyweight. We're talking Jack Johnson versus Stanley Ketchel, who was a pretty good middleweight. Jack Johnson had to outweigh Stanley Ketchel by at the very least 60 pounds. The fighters received 60% of the gross receipts, of which between the two of them, Jack Johnson got 65% and Stanley Ketchel got 35% split. Ketchel wanted the fight to be scheduled for 45 rounds, but Johnson insisted on a 20-round bout. There was a crowd of maximum capacity, up to 10,000 people, so much that 3,000 people were turned away at the door. The promoter stated that after the fight, that $40,000 had been taken in, which today would be between $1.1 and $1.2 million. Now, Ketchel was down in the 2nd and 3rd round of the fight. The legend has it, though, that both of them agreed to extend the fight to 20 rounds, just in case a motion picture came out of it in the future, but that didn't end up happening. But Stanley Ketchel saw an opening in the 12th round, and for some reason was feeling very enthusiastic, and floored Jack Johnson with a crushing right hand.
Johnson is down. It was a terrific right to the jaw.
When Jack Johnson got up, he immediately did a leaping, lunging combination across the ring, knocking out Stanley Ketchel. If you look closely, you can see Jack Johnson wiping Stanley Ketchel's teeth out of his gloves as Stanley Ketchel's getting counted out. Also in Jack Johnson's career, he fought longtime rival Joe Janay in an exhibition bout. Now, him and Joe Janay had known each other very well inside the ring, having fought 8 times in competition already. The rivalry would end with Jack Johnson with 3 wins and 1 loss, and 2 draws, and 2 no contest decisions in the competition. Janay never defeated Johnson for the title, but ended up winning his title on February 19, 1909. Their final bout was a 3-round exhibition match in 1945, which Johnson won. Jack Johnson was 67 years old. Joe Janay was 65 years old. It does sort of put you in the mindset of the older exhibition fights, like we just witnessed with Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones. 2 old men in the ring. Next up, Jack Dempsey versus King Levinsky. Dempsey, at the end of his career, did an exhibition tour. On March 4th, 1928, he announced his retirement from professional prize fighting. However, after losing $3 million in a 1929 stock market crash and divorcing Estelle Taylor in 1930, he needed money. He needed money. So he started a very active tour throughout the United States and Canada. From August 1931 to September 1932, he boxed over 100 exhibitions, beating people such as Big Bill Hartwell, Bearcat Wright, Jack Roper, Charlie Retzlaff, Art Lasky, Babe Hunt, Hank Hankinson, K.O. Christner. The crowds were big and the money was good. On February 18, 1931, Dempsey, who was considering a comeback, tested himself in a $74,000 fight in an exhibition with heavyweight contender King Levinsky before a crowd of 23,322 people at Chicago Stadium. Levinsky clearly got the better action, and Dempsey abandoned any plans for a comeback after that. Jack Dempsey earned $30,000, which today would be around $500,000, and King Levinsky got $10,000, which today would be around $160,000. Next, we got Willie Pep versus Sugar Ray Robinson. Sugar Ray Robinson, widely known to many as the greatest fighter of all time. The greatest moments of his career were fought between welterweight and middleweight. Robinson was inducted into the U.S. Army in 1943, where he served alongside his boyhood idol Joe Louis, when the two would often stage boxing exhibitions for the troops in Europe. Willie Pep, one of the greatest featherweights of all time, who would go on to fight in a lot of exhibitions. He even fought a 140-pound one-rounder versus Emil Griffith. But on December 13, 1965, Willie Pep and Sugar Ray Robinson would fight in a 4-round exhibition in front of a crowd of celebrities and former champions. At the time, Sugar Ray Robinson had fought 202 professional fights and had just retired in his career 1 month earlier. And Willie Pep was an active fighter, having fought 241 fights at the time. Both past their prime. Willie Pep was 43 and Robinson was 45 years old. You can watch that match right here on YouTube. George Foreman versus 5 guys. And I don't mean George Foreman versus 5 guys. I mean George Foreman versus 5 guys. Now, the way this fight came to be started like this. In 1974, 25-year-old George Foreman in his early 20s was at the height of his career, fighting and beating 2 great champions in Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, both who had already beat Muhammad Ali. So you gotta think about this. George Foreman just beat the first 2 guys to beat Muhammad Ali, and he beat them very easy. So when George Foreman and Muhammad Ali squared off, Muhammad Ali was a 4-1 underdog. In 1974, he ended up facing Muhammad Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle in Zaire, Africa, and was one of the biggest, most star-studded events ever. Muhammad Ali would end up beating George Foreman that night. But he didn't just beat him. He latched onto Foreman's ego and rode it into a very broken place. He lost. Now, after losing that fight, Foreman wasn't quite himself anymore. And he felt the need to show that he's still a bad man. He started to overcompensate for where he felt he came up short. So he took on 5 contenders and journeyman heavyweights in Toronto, Canada, April of 1975. The first opponent, a 1950s journeyman and also sparring partner of Muhammad Ali, Alonzo Johnson, who hadn't been active in over a decade.
Here's your time. Come up. Come up. Come up.
There he went down with the left. In spite of all the advices.
He fights dirty.
In spite of all the...
But right after that fight, the crowd immediately began chanting Ali's name. The second opponent, a smaller, more inexperienced heavyweight named Jerry Judge. Now, Judge got knocked down in the first round, but he actually rocked Foreman right after that.
He saw the way the kid came back with the left. Now, John...
Plus, Howard, I'm watching him.
today.
I'm spying on him.
Now, he got into Judge there and hurt him. With the left and with the right. Down went... What is happening there? Foreman is not himself. He's going after the kid again, needlessly, for no reason. He's beaten.
Now, the third opponent was Terry Daniels, a Texas heavyweight with no significant wins on his record and a loss to Joe Frazier. Now, with 30 seconds remaining in the second round, Foreman looked real tired and he motioned for the fight to be stopped, and the ref stopped it. But Daniels got pissed and he objected, and he began battling Foreman again as the referee argued with the cornerman. It was short-lived, but then the teams began fighting. Nothing made sense in this whole thing right here. The fourth opponent, Charlie Polite, now he blew kisses at George Foreman during the pre-fight, but he lasted all the way through the third and final round. He kept shaking his head. Then after the fight, he said Foreman degraded himself by failing to knock all 5 of us out. So that probably played into Foreman's head even more. And Foreman's last opponent was one of his previous victims he had already fought before, Boone Kirkman. Boom. And he lasted the distance because Foreman probably was super tired by that point. He looked like he was struggling to get his offense off. But you know, he did floor Kirkman in the opening round. This exhibition was just very interesting. But Foreman, he took on 5 live bodies and he put himself at some degree of a risk. He fought for almost 1 hour, full, and won. Up next, Muhammad Ali versus Rocky Marciano. It was called the Super Fight. It was basically a fictional boxing match between Rocky Marciano and Muhammad Ali, shot in 1969 and released in 1970. At the time, Ali and Marciano were the only undefeated heavyweight champions in history, and fans often debated who would win had they met in their primes. Ali and Marciano were filmed sparring for 75 one-minute rounds, producing several possible scenarios for a genuine fight, with the result claiming to have been determined using probability formulas entered into a computer. The fight had Rocky Marciano winning. The final film was only shown once in select cinemas around the world, grossing $5 million, which today's adjustment for inflation would be $33 million, from 1,500 theaters across North America and Europe. It was released as a DVD 3 decades later. Still on Muhammad Ali vs. Antonio Inoki. Muhammad Ali vs. Antonio Inoki was billed as the War of the Worlds. We all know Muhammad Ali, only one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, and Antonio Inoki was a Japanese professional wrestler who now goes by the name of Muhammad Hussein Inoki. They would fight each other at the Nippon Budokan Arena in Tokyo, Japan, June 26, 1976. At the time, Ali had come off a knockout victory over Richard Dunn in May and was the reigning WBC and WBA heavyweight champion. Inoki, who had been taught the art of wrestling, was staging exhibition fights against champions of various martial arts in an attempt to show that pro wrestling was the dominant fighting discipline. The fight was fought under special rules. The majority of the fight, Inoki just laid on his back, kicking his legs in the air. It's one of the craziest styles or strategies I ever seen. I mean, look at this shit, bro. Look at this shit, bro. Inoki kicked Muhammad Ali a total of 107 times, and the referee didn't even interfere because it was a rule that was negotiated shortly before the fight started, which allowed Inoki to kick and kick and kick without being disqualified. A little fact about this fight is Muhammad Ali almost had to have his legs amputated after this fight because all those kicks and damage over time caused blood clots in his legs, and he spent days in the hospital. The result of the fight was a draw though. Now while we still on Muhammad Ali, I gotta throw this honorable mention in there. Muhammad Ali versus Superman. For my nerds out there, I'm part nerd on everything, and Muhammad Ali vs. Superman is a celebrity comic book. published by DC Comics in 1978. It's 72 pages, and it features Superman teaming up with the heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali to defeat an alien invasion of Earth. Now, I read it. It's a very interesting little book, so I'm just going to tell a little bit of it. Basically, aliens come to Earth and say they want to fight Earth's greatest champion, or Earth will get his ass blown off. Now, of course, Muhammad Ali stepped up first to defend Earth because he feels he's Earth's greatest champion. But Superman stepped up at the same time, and the aliens were like, we got to figure out which one of y'all is the greatest champion. So to come to a conclusion, y'all two have to fight Muhammad Ali versus Superman. And I'm going to just leave it at that. But yeah, it's a classic. It's a classic. I don't want to tell the ending because it's a good read, and I feel like if you're really into boxing or comic books or one-on-one competitions of any sort, you may want to read it. Next up, Oscar De La Hoya. Now, Oscar De La Hoya, the golden boy of boxing, from his Olympic amateur career to the end of his professional career, when it comes to big fights, that is. Him and Floyd Mayweather generated over $19 million in live gate, beating the previous record of $16,860,000 set by the June 28, 1997 heavyweight champion rematch between Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson at the Thomas & Mack Center. De La Hoya generated approximately $700 million in pay-per-view income in his boxing career, before being surpassed by Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Manny Pacquiao. Now, what's interesting about Oscar De La Hoya is, in 2017, when Floyd Mayweather was preparing to fight MMA fighter Conor McGregor, Oscar sat down at his desk and wrote a 4-page open letter calling the fight a farce. One of his quotes stated, "With each passing day, it looks more and more likely that the circus known as Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor will be coming to town in the near future." And he also tweeted, "You Mayweather and McGregor, both of you are disrespecting the sport of boxing." Now, I found that second tweet to be very interesting because he spoke on the nature of that fight, disrespecting the sport of boxing. Well, Oscar must have somehow forgotten August 18th, 2009, where in a 5-round fight, which was filmed for the first season of the reality show Shaq vs., Oscar faced Shaquille O'Neal from the NBA. Oscar was almost 1 year retired and 36 years old at the time, coming off a loss to Manny Pacquiao. Shaq was 35 years old and still playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Oscar ended up winning the fight by decision. Funny enough, Shaquille O'Neal also fought a 38-year-old Shane Mosley, and Shane Mosley won by decision too. And there you have it. Just a brief history of exhibition bouts before the current or new era we have today. I'm sure it was probably some before and in between that I probably missed. So if you know of them, leave them in the comments. I'm sure it's going to be highly entertaining. For the diehard boxing fans, exhibitions never really were received that well. But for the casuals, it's an extremely fun event. Either way, we all end up tuning in anyway. And the true sport of boxing ain't going nowhere, no matter what. If you like the video, comment, like, subscribe, or do whatever you do. More content on the way.